Hey, Pastor Dwain, along with my beautiful bride Cameron, we want to invite you into a Sunday service. This has been previously recorded, but it is one of our Sunday services, and this message, I pray, is going to be a blessing to you as well as the atmosphere of our congregation. So God bless you as you join us in one of our Sunday services. That's January 16, 1994. January 17, 1994, a 6.8 earthquake devastates Los Angeles, California, doing $25 billion worth of damage and caused the Santa Susana Mountain to rise 1 foot and the LA basin to shrink. Wow. Scientists failed to identify the fault lines being triggered prior to this. In other words, this earthquake came out of nowhere. March the 1st, 1997, Yasser Arafat. I want to get my statement accurate. I'm just going to have to say I think, because I've had so much in my brain this week. The person that works for Biden and his administration, who is our liaison between us and Iran, was second. He was kind of like an armor bearer, if you will, second to Yasser Arafat. And the man they're trying to select to be ambassador to Israel is one of the most pro-Iran persons in the history of the United States. You think there's a pattern here? So, March 1, 1997. Arafat left Washington, D.C. after discussing that 6,500 housing units in East Jerusalem were occupying land that should be theirs. And so the New York Times says, welcoming Arafat, Clinton rebukes Israel. Arafat goes on a speaking tour, greeted warmly in the United States, and receives 5 United Nations Security Council votes to take back land from Israel. Let me just quickly give you this. This is just dealing with Yasser Arafat, the leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO. Very quickly. September 1, 1993, Clinton meets Arafat. Emily hits North Carolina. March 2nd, 1997, Clinton meets with Arafat. A string of tornadoes hit Arkadelphia, Arkansas, and massive flooding in Kentucky and Ohio. January 21, 1998, Clinton is waiting on Arafat to meet with him. The Monica Lewinsky sex scandal breaks into the public news media. September 27, 1998, Arafat comes to Washington, D.C. Hurricane George hits Alabama and stalls. October 17, 1998, Arafat is invited to the YWE plantation in Maryland, and Texas floods. November 23rd, 1998, Arafat raises funds for the PLO, and the American stock market crashes 216 points. Now, that was back in the day when the stock market was small, not like today at 30-something thousand points. A 216 downturn in one day was huge back then. December 12, 1998, Clinton meets Arafat in Gaza, and the House of Representatives votes to impeach Bill Clinton. March 23rd, 1999, Arafat comes to D.C. The stock market falls 219 points. September 3rd, 1999, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright meets in Israel with Arafat, and Hurricane Dennis hits America. September 22nd, 1999, Arafat comes to the U.S. The stock market falls 527 points for the week. June 16, 2000, Arafat comes to D.C. The market falls 265 points. July the 12th through the 26th in 2000, Arafat meets at Camp David. Droughts and fires destroy 7 million acres in the United States. November the 9th, 2000, Arafat comes to D.C. while the United States was in the election crisis in Florida. November the 11th, 2001, Arafat and the United Nations condemns Israel while Arafat meets with Secretary of State Colin Powell. And within 24 hours of that meeting, a plane crashes in New York City, killing 265 people 15 miles from the United Nations. May the 1st, 2002, the U.S. pressures Israel, this is under Bush, to release Arafat from his headquarters. And an F5 tornado hits the eastern United States, narrowly missing the White House. June of that year, wildfires burn 138,000 acres in Colorado and 550,000 acres in Arizona. January 21, 1998, Netanyahu meets with Clinton to talk about the peace plan. Clinton receives him coldly. Clinton and Madeleine Albright refused to have lunch with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and immediately after that is when the sex scandal broke on Clinton, and Clinton has to spend time before the grand jury and is ultimately impeached. May the 4th of that year, Arafat set to declare a Palestinian state. May the 3rd at 4:47 p.m., an F4 and an F5 tornado, almost an F6, wipe out Oklahoma and Kansas, major cities there. 50 tornadoes. And that May the 3rd and 4th, listen to me, there were 50 tornadoes, 200 tornado warnings. One tornado was a mile wide and covered 80 miles in 4 hours. Everything in Oklahoma was gone. 43 dead, 20 hours of terror, 2,000 homes gone in Oklahoma City and Mulhall, Oklahoma. October the 11th, 1999, the Israeli government evicts settlers from 15 West Bank hilltops. October 16, New York Times writes an article about the eviction, and also in the same paper say that the stock market of the U.S. collapsed 5.7%. Hurricane Irene at the same time hits North Carolina. There's a 7.1 earthquake in the southwest part of the United States. October the 16th, the 5th most powerful earthquake to hit the U.S. in the 20th century. Then we come to January to April of 2000. Clinton meets Ehud Barak, and Farouk al-Shara of Syria meet. And at that same time, on January the 3rd and the 4th, it is declared that they will give 5% of the Golan Heights back to Syria, and the Dow falls 359 points, NASDAQ 229 points. $600 billion is lost in the United States by March the 10th. Ehud Barak recognizes the Palestinian state, and the NASDAQ that spring will ultimately lose $4 trillion. Are y'all awake out there? I know I'm overloading you with information, but I'm trying to hurry. June the 6th through the 9th, 2001, George W. Bush sends CIA Director George Tenet to broker a ceasefire between Israelis and Palestinians and stop Israel from building settlements in East Jerusalem. At the same time, Tropical Storm Allison reforms in the Gulf, and 28 inches of rain fall on Houston, Texas, flooding that city with 3 feet of rain, destroying and damaging 25,000 homes, 50,000 automobiles. That cost that city $3 billion, and the state of Texas $4 billion. August the 9th. Now stay with me and watch this. August 9, 2001. August 9, 2001. A suicide bomber kills 19, wounds over 100 in Israel. George W. Bush publicly condemns, but says Israel is the cause. He demands that Israel abide by the Madrid peace process, the Mitchell Plan, and the UN resolutions 242 and 338, which calls for Israel to retreat to the pre-6-day war borders. Now, if you don't know anything about that, you have to understand that if Israel gives back the West Bank, the Golan Heights, they have no defense against Iran and Syria and Lebanon and anyone to their east. They're totally exposed. George W. Bush, in August 2001, demands Israel give up all of their protective land on their east side. This would leave them totally defenseless. Exactly 32 days later, terrorists take down the World Trade Center, hit the Pentagon, would have taken out the White House if it were not for those brave people on that airplane. More Americans died on 9/11/2001 than died in Pearl Harbor. It cost Americans $40 billion to recover the damages. And the results of that terrorist attack, regardless of what you think about it, whether you think it was caused from the inside, whether you think it was caused from the outside, whether you think the government knew about it, let it happen, you can just work all that out with your conspiracy ideas, and that's just between you and the Lord. I'm just telling you that Bush demanded that they give back everything on the east side of Israel to the Palestinians, and America was decimated in a greater portion than ever in the history of this country.
That's right.
I think when God said, if you touch my people, I will touch you, I think he meant it. April the 30th, 2003, the United States, the United Nations, Russia, and the EU drafted a roadmap for peace. May the 4th through the 11th, Colin Powell went to Israel and Syria to promote this roadmap for peace. 412 tornadoes hit the East Coast, costing America $2 billion. September the 12th, 2003, Bush blocks Israel from expelling Arafat from their nation, and Hurricane Isabel reaches a Category 5 hurricane and is directed at the United States. September 16, the U.S. vetoed a UN resolution against Israel. The hurricane lessened, and Bush and King Abdullah met as Isabel hits Washington, D.C. September the 19th, meetings end early because of the $4 billion worth of damage Isabel caused on the eastern coastline of America. August to September 2004, Bush pressures Israel to withdraw from 21 settlements in Gaza. Now follow this. August to September 2004, Bush is pressuring Israel to give Gaza totally to the Palestinians. August 7th, he sends an envoy to talk to them. August the 9th, a tropical depression formed on the 12th and became known as Hurricane Charlie. August the 13th, it hits Florida, causing 1.4 million people to be evacuated, $14 billion in damages. September 1, Hurricane Francis hits Central Florida, costing 2.8 billion people being evacuated. August the 30th, Ariel Sharon said we must hurry the evacuation in September, and Francis hit Florida, costing $10 billion. September the 14th, and we're talking about 2004, Ariel Sharon of Israel and his cabinet create evacuation guidelines to remove Israel's population from Gaza. September 15, Ivan hits Florida, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina on Rosh Hashanah. September the 20th, Secretary Powell gives a speech in Israel as the evacuation from Gaza must be the first step to peace. September 21, Bush and the United Nations and Israel have a settlement freeze, and they all condemn Israel over their resistance to give back land. September the 25th, at Yom Kippur, Jenin hits Florida. 3 million are evacuated, $12.2 billion in damages. January the 5th, January of 05, I should say, Abbas takes over for Yasser Arafat, calls for the destruction of Israel. Bush assures his support for Palestinian state, while California, Ohio, and West Virginia have the worst storms in 104 years. April the 5th, through September, April of 05, through September of 05, they closed 25 Jewish settlements in Gaza. August the 23rd, Israel removed the last settler, 05. August to September, 05, Ariel Sharon, George W. Bush remove 80,000 Jews from their homes in Gaza. Keep that in mind. You can go look it up on YouTube. They're dragging these Jewish people. Their parents' have lived there for generations, and they're dragging these people out of their homes, screaming and crying. How well would it go in Cabot, Arkansas, and in Little Rock and the surrounding areas if the National Guard showed up at your house and said, we're taking your house? You'd be like, well, this is my house. Yeah, but we're confiscating it. And listen, this was Israel's own government under Sharon. He sent the IDF into Jewish homes and drugged these people out of their homes in Gaza so that this terrorist organization and this group could take over, and now they're having to root them out. You keep in mind, August and September 05, 80,000 Jews are drugged from their home in Gaza, and on the day the last settler was removed, over the Bahamas, a storm formed and intensified named Katrina. Katrina was 375 miles wide and was had the third lowest barometric pressure ever on record. And listen to me. And while 80,000 homes were lost and given up in Gaza, 120,000 were given up in New Orleans. 70% of the city was destroyed. Bush was humiliated on global television for his lack of preparation for Katrina. He was done at that point in the public eye. August the 17th, look at the parallels. August the 17th, Israel made a mandatory evacuation of Gaza. September the 7th, the mayor of New Orleans is giving a mandatory evacuation of New Orleans. 12,000 Jews have to leave Gaza. Millions of Americans have to leave New Orleans. Israel sends in 40,000 troops into Gaza. America sends in 80,000 troops into the destroyed areas of New Orleans. The Jews go to their rooftops to keep from being removed from their homes. You remember the pictures of Americans sitting on their rooftops in New Orleans while their houses are underwater. Gaza is in the southern portion of Israel. New Orleans is the southernmost portion of the United States. Thousands of Jewish homes destroyed. 500,000 American homes were destroyed. The Jews were digging up their dead in their cemeteries to move them out of Gaza. You saw caskets come up out of the cemeteries in New Orleans floating in New Orleans. The Jews were barred from reentry to Gaza. Americans were barred from reentry into New Orleans. Israelis were moved out of Gaza by buses. Americans were moved out of New Orleans by buses to other portions of the United States. Israel lost a major agricultural center. New Orleans was one of America's greatest shipping centers. Bush gave $2 billion to relocate Americans, and it cost us $200 billion in the Gulf. September the 21st, Israel completed its pullout of Samaria, and Rita became a Category 5 and devastated Houston. When you take God's people out of their land, I think God is serious. Yes. Why America? Why did this happen? Because we had the power to stop it. We're the nation that forced it. If America stood with Israel and looked at the PLO and looked and said, we're not only not going to make them give their land up, we're going to come help them take all of it back. So my point to you is, every president except Donald John Trump since 1991 simply gave lip service to Israel. And it devastated the lifestyle, the lives, the homes, the economy of this nation, because God said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I have so many things I could continue. I mean, in 2008, Bush and Cheney and Condoleezza Rice said the two-state solution would be finalized by the end of 2008. At that same time, Hurricane Ike headed toward Texas. The Lehman Brothers were caught. The banks failed $700 billion. The collapse of 2008 occurred. And then in 2008, we elected the least friendly president toward Israel in the history of this nation. And everything started doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. Are y'all okay? Yeah. All right, I'm just checking. I'm just trying to see if you're asleep or bored or... From 2009 to 2016, I don't have time, not going to take the time to go through the Obama administration totally. But July 6, 2010, finally, after being in office for a year and a half, Netanyahu is invited to the White House. Netanyahu has not been invited to the White House by Biden yet. If you want to know who's running D.C., it's Obama, it's not Biden. This man has the greatest disdain and hatred for the Jews and Israel known to man because of the Marxist communist white grandfather that raised him in Hawaii. Netanyahu is not greeted as a diplomat in July of 2010. They bring him into the White House through the servants' quarters. And when he meets with Obama in the White House, Obama puts his feet up on the desk. And in the Hebrew culture, that's the same as giving a Jew the middle finger. You're no better than what's on the bottom of my shoes, is what he was saying. At that particular point in time, in that meeting, July 6, 2010, he's pressuring Netanyahu to give up land. And Prime Minister Netanyahu's very words are, Israel will never give land for peace. Angry, Obama stands up and says, I'm going to have dinner with Michelle and the children, and leaves him sitting there alone in the Oval Office. His very words were, the two-state solution will never exist as long as I'm prime minister. President Obama then proceeds to take $500 million of your tax dollars to support Prime Minister Netanyahu's opponent in the next election to get him beat. You may or may not know this, but Clinton and Obama both raised money to get Netanyahu out of office. Your tax dollars, by the way. That's July of 2010. What happens in December of 2010? Oh, how soon we forget. December 2010, in Tunisia, a fruit stand salesman sets himself on fire in protest of the theocratic tyrant government. Obama takes advantage of that event and declares an Arab Spring and releases the Muslim Brotherhood that he created to go into Tunisia, then to Libya, then to Egypt, then to Syria, and he overthrew every leader except Assad in Syria, calling it the Arab Spring. Why did he do that? Why did President Obama do that? Because every good Muslim knows that it requires a caliph or caliphate among the Arab nations to produce their Messiah, the 12th Imam of the Islamic religion. How many of you read in your Bible in 1 Thessalonians when the Bible says, in the last days there come a great falling away? Have you read that? Well, that's typically preached by us preachers as Christians are going to fall away from their faith in the last days, and maybe that's true. But the root word in Greek of falling away is rebellion of lawlessness. That's what it means. And it's talking about a caliphate. The Antichrist, in other words, he's saying in Thessalonians, the Antichrist, who is the leader of Islam, the 12th Imam of the Islamic faith, he cannot be revealed and come to power until there's a rebellion of lawlessness among the Islamic nations. That's what that actually says. Obama knowingly got rid of Mubarak in Egypt, and now these weren't nice guys. I'm not saying they were good guys. Gaddafi in Libya, and he did that because they were at peace with Israel. And he knew if he could unsettle their governments and overthrow their leaders, then he could create possibly a caliphate that would be the destruction of Israel and the production of their Messiah. In the middle of all of that, a glitch occurred that neither he nor Hillary Clinton expected. There's a picture that you can find online of John McCain, a Republican senator, meeting with some freedom fighters. After we went into Tunisia and Libya, John McCain took all of our weapons and sold them to some freedom fighters who were going to go into Iraq, Syria, and ISIS was born. If you don't know your history, our own government created the Taliban. Our own government created ISIS. Our own government created Hamas and Hezbollah by not stopping this land for peace. As a matter of fact, promoting it. Now, I'm going to say something unpopular to a lot of people. And the only reason they did it was to get rich. That's it. The thousands of American soldiers' lives and blood that was spilled on the desert sands of Iraq, Afghanistan, other parts of that world have greased and oiled the pockets of the Clintons and the Bushes and the Obamas and the McConnells and the McCains and right on down the list. Yep. And you can't make me believe otherwise. Thank God for America's brave soldiers and men and women who did their duty, but they deserve better than that. So the glitch is Ambassador Stevens in Benghazi found out. He found out that McCain sold the weapons. He found out that we created ISIS. He found out what we were actually up to, and he had to be removed. Hillary Clinton sent him to Benghazi and murdered him and those brave soldiers that were standing with him. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama murdered Ambassador Stevens and the 4 brave soldiers that stood on that ambassador's office and defended him. And when those soldiers tell you that they were close by and could have intervened, but they were told to stand down, you can believe them. Karen and I thank you for joining us in today's broadcast where we previously recorded a sermon on Sunday, and we hope it was a blessing to you to come into our congregation and our atmosphere on a Sunday morning service. Until next time, God bless you.